Oh, Inti Creates. It seems like every time I return to you, you either make a game that's so absolutely peak that I can't look another 2D action game in the face for a month, or you give me something that's so fucking close to that, if not for one absolutely baffling decision that sours the whole experience. The excruciatingly redundant side quest system in ZX1, gimping Copen's air dash in X2, dropping Gunvolt 2's plot threads in Gunvolt 3, just a few examples of times when one choice snowballed into affecting the whole experience. For today's subject, Guadians Servants of the Dark, you can probably guess which spot it lands in by how I chose to start the video. However, that still does mean it gets a lot right, and I'll talk about that too. In fact, even the big issue with this game feels fixable with a hefty patch to me. But I guess we should get into all of that. Today I'm talking about Guadians Servants of the Dark, a sequel to Guardians Demon Purge from 2 years ago. A GalGun spin-off I covered around the time of release, and I'm guessing that's why PQube, the Western publisher for the GalGun series, offered me a review code. So for reference, I did not pay for this game, and I played version 1.1.0 roughly a week before release date for my main playthrough. So if anything I say doesn't line up with what you played, then I totally purposefully said it wrong, and you can yell at me in the comments. Additionally, like with the first Guardians, I decided to play this primarily in multiplayer, since that aspect of it enticed me when compared to other Metroidvanias I could play. However, since my brother and I both moved out of my parents' house and he's very inept with using a computer for his age, I didn't play with him this time. Instead, I convinced my wife to play it with me. She did not grow up playing video games besides some casual mobile games and a few multiplayer games her cousins or I have convinced her to play, like Just Dance, Puyo Puyo, and whatever is right in front of us in the arcade, making Guardians 2 the first full video game with a narrative she has ever played. A statement no other human may earn the right to say even by the time our planet explodes. Ironic given that she did not approve much of me playing GalGun Double Peace for the last video. Anyways, because of this, do not expect the most top tier technical gameplay today. I don't consider either Guardians titles particularly difficult by Inti Creates standards, but pretty much every game they develop does assume a player contains some form of genre savviness with 2D action games. A savviness she does not have. With that, we can get to the actual game. Unlike every past entry in the GalGun series, Guardians 2 does not take place at Sakurazaki Academy or mention much from the other GalGun games. It takes place entirely within the demon realm, starring two brand new characters. The demon maid sisters Kirika and Masha, who serve the demon lord Maxim Onslaught Realm Razor Legrand III. When we begin, we find the sisters returning earlier than intended from a short vacation. Masha especially worried that with the two of them gone, the castle might descend into some kind of chaos that they might need to use their maid abilities to clean up quickly. What wild foreshadowing. The real see a cloud of smoke coming from Lord Maxim Castle, motivating them to zoom forward to check up on Maxim's safety. Upon reaching the castle's throne room, we find that the head maid, Lysa, and the competing demon lord, Lysanorg, have killed Maxim to prove Lysanorg's superiority. Of course, the maid duo don't appreciate that much, so they challenge Lysa to air out their frustration, which don't go so well. Lysa mops the floor with the girls, despite you, the player, still needing to win. Not that she's too hard anyways. Only took us 2 tries. But most players will probably only take 1. This was my wife's first boss fight ever, meaning a tall, big-boobied French maid took her first. After Lysa leaves, we find Maxim just barely survived the big electric strike he took, now consisting only of his skull and soul. Our maid duo don't want to leave their master in such a sorry state, so they vow that they're gonna find every bone to Maxim's body and defeat the evil demon lord Lysanorg. A standard Castlevania-type setup, only instead of playing as a demon hunter, we finally get a game where we can play on the demon side. I'm gonna make it clear, I'll mostly just compare this to Inti's other 2D platformers, particularly Guardians 1. I'll review a few points for anyone that doesn't care to scroll back to my other video, but if you didn't see that one, then I may not make too much sense to you. If I explain absolutely everything, I'm just gonna repeat what I've said with Guardians, Gunvolt, and other Inti stuff. Additionally, some time has passed since I played the first game, and I don't want to delay this too much since I received a review code, so I'm mainly gonna use my old review to refresh my memory on some aspects rather than a full replay. Which gets me towards something I said near the end of that video, the general structure. Guardians 1 consisted of multiple non-linear stages with items and lost students defined and secret paths, but every area still had a clear start and end point with a boss. While Servants of the Dark moves into a full search action structure with a swell amount of guidance sometimes. Also, I might finally start to call these things search action because my wife looked at me like I chanted demon words by saying Metroidvania. Unlike the first Guardians, which technically took place entirely in the castle, Servants mostly takes place outside in various parts of the demon realm with a traditional search action map that slowly fills fills in as you discover the world. We have 7 areas of the realm, plus 2-ish mini castles to map out. Each biome fits neatly into the normal video game level themes of ice, lava, caverns, etc., and I'm guessing that's mainly to reuse assets from Guardians 1, which I say is an observation, not an inherent negative. Like, besides maybe the water pump level, which feels reminiscent of a few other Castlevania areas, none of these aesthetics on their own wow me as a brand new original idea, but I think if you buy one of these types of games, you know what you signed up for. The big difference aesthetically from the first Guardians comes from the aura. To match with venturing through the Demon Realm proper, most of the zones have a mysterious wilderness vibe compared to GG1. For example, while Servants reuses some assets from the first title's ice and lava stage, we did not spend much time in those locales in the first game, while Servants turns these into 2 of the larger biomes. It makes Guardians 2 at least stand out from the first game. It's still not the most wowing locales ever, especially compared to Inti's usual, which I've got to remind you, hits a high bar sometimes, but it looks pretty good. However, I'm sure the part more people wonder about comes from how they connect to each other. Like a normal search action game, as you progress, you'll see a lot of paths you just can't seem to reach, but can once you come back with later movement upgrades. Some you get from beating bosses, some from equipable medals, but most often by leveling up Maxim with the bones you find, which I have a lot to say on, so let's get to the other stuff first. Masha and Kirika play very similarly to Maya and Shinobu from the last game, which already felt close to your standard Inti title or non-linear Castlevania game. Masha has a close-range thorn whip attack like Maya, while Kirika uses guns and other explosives like Shinobu. Since my wife is as beginner as it gets, she played as Kirika to keep her distance while I played as Masha. For movement, the big change from last time that I'm sure many people will appreciate is that you can dash and air dash after upgrading. In addition, I'm certainly welcome of, since I felt the lack of a dash button accounted for Demon Purge's strangest choice in the game. While with your attacks, the only big change relates to the sub-weapons. Demon Purge gave each girl a new weapon after beating every boss, with this little weapon wheel to select your weapon. It worked well enough, quite a lot of them affected stage terrain, making the second castle feel more different, assuming you didn't make the dumb decision to backtrack after every single upgrade like my brother and I did. Instead of that system, Servants has a shit ton of weapons you get to equip yourself. And by that, I mean enemies drop a shit ton of weapons. Truly, I think the weapon variety amount hovers around the same number as Demon Purge. Only now, instead of each weapon coming to you exactly when the developers want you to get it, enemies drop them very frequently, like to an overwhelming degree, and I kinda get how this happened. Even when you find the same weapon, they can have slightly different stats or properties attached. You know, +2 more attack, cost half ammo, potential to freeze enemies, your standard RPG properties that force you to scan through your menus, which eventually led us to ignoring the new sub-weapons we found fairly frequently. Some only go on Kirika, some on Masha, and some for both. At any given time, you have 1 sub-weapon on Triangle and 1 on Circle. Then later on, you can add 3 extra sets of weapons you can swap between with the D-pad, bringing your total at any given time to 8, but by then, you'd probably have a given 3 or 4 each character likes using, thereby making 8 weapons feel a little excessive to swap between, and I wasn't about to confuse my wife with all that, so again, I mostly ignored it besides equipping both of us with the best versions of weapons we had, and a few utility items, of which Servants doesn't have too many. I'm guessing because the developers couldn't entirely know if you had a given weapon when, which also might have motivated how fucking many enemies drop, but the only true utility weapons I can recall right after beating the game are Kirika's fire grenades that burn regular vines blocking your path in the forest area, and Masha's lantern which lights up dark rooms, most common in the caves. Besides that, you only need sub-weapons for combat, and 1 you use for healing, which I guess made it easier for us to just equip the big hitter weapon. Justifying that idea even more, very late when I learned this, you can synthesize multiples of the same weapon to make each one stronger, mitigating a complaint I initially thought about with limited inventory that doesn't actually exist. As long as you keep synthesizing the multiples, you have more than enough space. Anyways, I'd call this a side grade more than anything compared to the first game. In hindsight, I recall many times when my brother and I sat in front of a new stage gimmick testing every single weapon until something finally worked. So at least that's not here. Even the few spots I mentioned make it kinda obvious. Like, by the time you have to burn vines to progress, you've already passed the midway point of the main campaign. Then the only other slightly vague progression mechanic with weapons has to deal with Masha's charge attacks, because instead of a normal charge attack like Maya had in the first game, Masha holds onto 5 of these little ball attacks. A Wolverine helmet that spits out vines, take a guess what the fireball does, and the ice ball freezes paths blocked by lava. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm guessing the fireball can also burn the vines, but too late to check now. the main point is, the weapons don't really affect where you progress. Your main method of going to new paths uses your movement upgrades that I'm gonna need to talk about the bone mechanic for. But also, you can ignore that a little longer if you're playing in multiplayer. So Guardians 1 also had this mechanic where the player can stand on the other player's head, which then allows you to do a trick where you either help a player reach higher ground by jumping on them, or the bottom player can jump followed by the top player to reach a super high platform. We definitely used this mechanic a few times in Demon Purge, but since now we have a full-on Metroidvania with levels designed to take into account that later on, players can receive triple and quadruple jumps, my wife and I got tons of use out of this. Like in the lava level, you can find some treasure chests up at the top right point of the map, but you can only get there by succeeding through a platform challenge that punishes you heavily for falling. One slip up and you need to walk a few rooms over to try again, unless you abuse this extra jumping strat to jump even higher than intended. I don't think this strat lets you do anything absolutely wild like skip entire areas, but who knows what people might discover later on. We still grabbed a lot of treasure chests earlier than intended, and this ability, in my opinion, justifies maybe finding one friend to play the game with you instead of going at it single player. Similar to what I said with the first game, if you're going to pick a Metroidvania, there's lots of single player ones to pick. Anyways, let's get to the bones of Maxim. Maxim's bones fill the void of an experience system. Rather than gaining small amounts of experience after killing an enemy like in Castlevania, you need to return enough bones to Maxim to level him up, and at certain levels, Maxim gains enough demon power to share a new ability with the girls. This includes a healing move we never used because it wasn't explained too well, extra air dashes, double, triple, extra multiple jumps, a big dumb punch that breaks the purple blocks, and the most busted spark dash I've ever seen in a video game. Initially, when they mentioned that we're looking for Maxim's bones, I assumed we'd only obtain them at bosses or story checkpoints. A very incorrect assumption. You get bones from bosses, treasure chests, and sadly, enemy drops. This creates a very big problem. The one I alluded to at the start. Since the bones level you up, like experience, and enemies drop them, like experience, I made the somewhat logical assumption that Servants of the Dark had an infinite amount of bones. Therefore, we did not stress about getting too many during the start. However, like most people, Maximus does not have an infinite number of bones. Yep, Inti put in a very weird mechanic. Reminder, I'm playing this early, so I can't even check a guide to see if I'm right. It seems that once you gain enough bones in one area, enemies don't drop more bones. Meaning if you want to feel slightly confident that you found every bone in an area, you need to grind enemies until enough kills have passed without extra bones. And even then, you may end up in the same spot I have right now, 2 unfound bones. By the time I finish and upload this video, I'm gonna have to find those 2 bones, but I have spent an ungodly amount of time searching for them. I've never done this with a video where I decided, fuck it, I'm gonna make this entire video except for whatever happens at the good ending, because finding these 2 bones seems so fucking impossible, I needed a break. I know, I must have missed something, but it feels like I've fought tons of enemies in every area. I have 100% map completion besides this one spot I don't know how to open. I'd assume it has to do with all the bones, and I've spark dashed across what feels like the whole map, and they easily could mitigate this. The only reason I know I just have 2 bones left to find is because the level up meter says 2 remains for the final level, a number I couldn't see any earlier than right now, a number small enough where I can't feel confident enemies won't drop it. If something indicated I don't need to grind anymore, maybe Maximus saying it at the throne room, I could at least have a better idea on what I'm doing wrong. Instead, I know it's a minor enough, small enough thing that any answer is still viable. Now, just for getting the normal ending, I don't see anyone having a problem finding enough bones. Personally, our only roadblock came right before getting the spark dash, but if you don't buy anything from the shopkeepers, you'll have enough money for this very large bone in the desert, and that should make the rest of the main game pleasant enough, because the spark dash fucking zooms. It's almost comedic how much of the map opens up with the spark dash. You use it both to break open the shiny purple vines and to run on water. We had no clue what to do about the water initially. Guardians 1 gave you an origami boat, so I assumed it had to do with that, when really, you just do a fucking Hydro City blast over it. Honestly, we started growing a little annoyed with how many spots locked us off due to water, but getting an ability this busted made up for that. So while I'm still very pissed off with the cryptic Aria of Sorrow ass bone shit you need for the true ending, this dash makes the the hunt for them significantly less monotonous than if we didn't have it. Truly, I feel like I'm getting really negative for a game that I actually mostly enjoyed, and this negativity would be completely gone if they just patched in a tracker for the bones, maybe even only give it to the player after finding the normal ending. Anyways, with that, let's talk about a few improvements from last time to even it out. Compared to last time, I really appreciate how nicely everything flows together. While I did call the second castle from Demon Purge one of the better second castles in a Castlevania-esque experience, I think most people can agree that after the novelty of Symphony doing it, games that have it usually do it to pad out game time. And with Demon Purge, that second castle could have flowed better if every stage connected with a full map. So I'm really glad we shifted into a straightforward search action world design. This change caused them to remove the live system, bottomless pits that kill you, and any instant death from Demon Purge. Additionally, with the inclusion of a normal map, we get both pre-made icons to remind us if we saw a treasure chest we couldn't reach, a save point, shopkeep, fast travel points, and we can place down our own reminder points. This really helped us out when we hit the water-related roadblock. Since I've played enough of these games, I knew we had to get something to help us pass them soon, so we put down one icon for those, another for the black blocks we couldn't open, one for gated doors we couldn't find the switch in, and another for one-way entry points. This saved us tons of time at the halfway point. For sure, use this as much as you feel fit. I'd say Servants of the Dark has one of the most handy maps in one of these games. Only one item is missing on the map, and that's the demon souls we need to find, which kinda has to do with the story that I'll get to now. If there's one thing other than the multiplayer that helps Servants stand out, it's maintaining the charm of GalGun. And I don't mean like, oh look, some boobs bouncy, which we still get a little of, but more so in that it's not afraid to enter silly mode. Servants of the Dark definitely weighs heavier on the gameplay side than cutscenes compared to Demon Purge. Not that 2D action games ever have that many cutscenes, but that doesn't mean these scenes we have don't exude charm. Kirika, Masha, and Maxim perfectly fit the typical roles of a comedy trio, with the deadpan Kirika who occasionally lets her emotions pop up, the air-headed Masha, and Maxim's commentary on the two's antics with each other or whoever they meet, which they meet quite a few people. Servants uses the Demon Realm sap very effectively by, instead of saving students that mostly function the same besides the returning GalGun characters, you save different monster servants killed by Lysa who work for Lord Maxim. Each of them represents a different species from skeleton, tree person, naga, gyadu, and even Blobby. Everyone loves Blobby, he cleans the floors! These characters let us see different sides of our heroines. Neither of them feel too fondly of goblins since they cause a ruckus and thus more work for the maids. Masha gets along really well with her fellow garden hoe. They both raise questions about how to properly kill yourself when you have no head, and nicely eat some omuru raisu, given by the French chef. The comedic timing and jokes here got a lot of laughs out of us. You'll always have a good idea when it's coming up. We have a varied cast of characters, actually including men this time, and very little connection to past games, so you don't need to worry about references. I'll come back to that in just a minute, but having now beat the game, I kinda feel like throwing in a bunch of references to GalGun probably posed a risk of taking away from Masha and Kirika's story, so I'm not too bummed about it, though I still think it could have used one more funny girl that happens to live in the Demon Realm. Instead, we only meet the Kamizono sisters who starred in Demon Purge. Marketing in the intro initially had me believe we might fight them a few times, possibly as the final or fake final boss. You, the funny demon maids, must face off against the frightening demon hunters who want nothing more than to rid the world of your kind. An interesting idea that I'm glad they didn't go for. That idea could lead to a boss feeling maybe too reminiscent of the Richter fight from Symphony, and I think they wanted to feel a little more distinct from Castlevania this time. And what they do with the girls is pretty respectful to the last game as well. Shinobu and Maya use all their old moves from Demon Purge when you fight them, reminding me a bit of the end of Mega Man X5 and the fight in ZX Advent against Ventilation. Closer to the latter one, because after the fight, the four girls become buddy-buddy. Instead of doubling down on their extreme prejudice like their descendant, Shinobu and Maya smell the friendliness on the demons and refrain from fighting further. Actually, they have nothing to do with the rest of the main plot going forward. You only interact with them in their own side quest featuring drum solos, meal recipes, the most bullshit way to complete, which does relate to that stupid gate I couldn't figure out, and of course, a sexy anime hot spring scene. One I totally would not look closely at next to my wife. Besides the very stupid way to finish their quest, I enjoyed their appearance. It gives a nice connection to Demon Purge that doesn't make a new player feel like they missed out on too much. The talking about them does segue into the last few things to talk about since they connect together: the bosses, ending, and of course, ecchi elements. I know, when I talked about Demon Purge I sounded very negative about GalGun and the sex stuff, but again, I want to stress that my issue wasn't that I'm a prude who hates ecchi elements. I just didn't think the primary joke was funny enough to carry 3 games. My leniency for anime sex humor has definitely shrunk as I got older. I'm looking at you, you stupid old man, but I don't consider myself some die-hard religious fanatic that screams at the sight of premarital handholding. I just felt that sometimes it detracted from the rest of the tone, and in Demon Purge, that felt most distracting at the final boss where it turned into normal GalGun for the very last phase. Which is why I'm glad to say that Servants of the Dark finds a very good balance by limiting ecchi elements almost entirely to bosses and not letting that overtake the final boss. It makes those moments stick out in a more fun way too. Like when we first reached Renice the Dragon in her castle, even my wife found it funny to shoot the big dragon gal in the tits, and then shoot the big plant girl in the boobs after she did some funny tentacle stuff to us. Only a few moments really lean into this. So if you still want a super mega ecchi game, then maybe this won't do it for you. But this game requires 2 hands to play effectively, so I don't know, dude, you're looking in the wrong spot. For us, it made the bosses stick out, or I guess you could say doubly stick out, which is important on 2-player mode since you can pretty much just spam your weapons and come out Gucci. I mean, you still gotta dodge a little, you can't be stupid, especially with the final boss, but don't look for difficulty in multiplayer. Though saying that, let's get to the final part. Nothing really too shocking happens in the story that's not a spoiler for a joke. Basically, our team makes it up to Lysanorg's castle to fight him and Liza in the climactic final duel, where it's revealed that he's stolen Maxim's heart, as he plans to use that, combined with the passing of 666 years, bringing about the super mega evil moon to claim the title of the true very cool demon lord of all the realm. Therefore, it's up to the demon maids to stop him, but oh no! They can't quite do it! So Lord Maxim brings himself in to stop Lysanorg himself. However, without those last 2 fucking bones, we got the Shotokan ending. Not the worst bad ending I've ever seen in a game, they've just gotta wait for Maxim to grow back up, but it did leave a void that I knew the true ending could fill. And so I went back into the game, found the last of the souls I missed, finished the side quest with the sisters, achieved every achievement, and then with those final 2 bones, went into the final boss one more time. Maxim came in with his big fist to punch Lysanorg through the moon with the power of love. Okay, yeah, I couldn't find those last 2 bones. I wanted this video out for patrons on the 28th since that's when the embargo ended, which allows me to talk about the ending, but I just can't find those 2 bones. I'm realizing from Steam discussion that a few glitches I didn't run into existed before the first few patches that now exist, so I'm just going to convince myself that the pre-release version just has something that doesn't let me get those last 2 bones. At 4, maybe even 5 hours of searching in a previously 12-hour game, I think I deserve to see the true ending. And it's fine. Not fucking worth the amount of time I was looking for those 2 bones, and it doesn't have the wow factor of Demon Purge's big power of friendship moment. But if I saw it after only an extra hour of bone searching, maybe it'd hit different. Which, again, that's just my big problem with Servants of the Dark. The 2D action fundamentals Inti has followed since their time at Capcom, and their understanding of search action games shows throughout the whole experience. The multiplayer sets it apart from contemporaries and makes it a good entry point for a friend you want to get into Inti games. Especially with the Bat mode, my wife got to skip a lot of platforming with that, and Servants of the Dark has that same Inti charm we know from Demon Purge, Blaster Master, and Gunvolt. But man, it needs some work to direct the players better. Assistance for post-game bone hunting, some kind of hint about where to find Maya and Shinobu for their quest, because 2 of their 4 locations are completely fucking random, and actual text telling you what buttons to press to perform the demon abilities will go a long way in improving the experience. Although, quick correction here, they just patched in that last point. I want to recommend Servants of the Dark. I thoroughly enjoyed playing it with my wife, but I'm thinking we'll see a fully patched version roughly by the time it starts going on sale, so go ahead and wait a bit before you pick it up.